They say power has a sound. For me, it's the sharp echo of my heels striking the polished marble of the 15th floor, my floor. Every morning, the rhythm reminds me of where I stand now and where I once wasn't allowed to. The city stretches beyond my window in a skyline of steel and glass, but the reflection looking back at me is the real story, a woman they once tried to erase. I smooth the sleeve of my silk blouse, the color of midnight, and glance at the chair behind my desk. Funny thing about chairs, people assume they define authority. Once they took mine away. They didn't just take it. They ripped it from under me as if I hadn't earned it, as if I didn't belong. That day is burned into me. My phone buzzes against the oak surface. A name flashes across the screen. A name I haven't seen in years. My stomach tightens, though my face doesn't move. Composure is my armor now. I inhale slowly, tasting the faint bitterness of the coffee still warm in its porcelain cup. Outside my office, muted voices drift, employees moving with purpose. They don't know the full story of how I got here, what it cost, what it broke. But the universe has a strange way of circling back. The very people who once took my chair are about to walk across the floor I own. I was 24 when it happened, fresh out of graduate school, eager, hungry, convinced that hard work was enough to prove myself. The company lobby smelled of leather and ambition, the kind of place where dreams wore tailored suits. And for a while I believed I was part of that dream, until the day they made it clear I was not. It was a Tuesday morning, spring rain streaking the windows, when I was called into the conference room. The air inside felt colder than the hallway, sharp with a tang of stale coffee and tension. I walked in clutching my notebook. Always my shield, always my proof that I belonged here. My manager, a man whose name still makes my stomach twist, didn't look me in the eye. He gestured toward the chair at the far end of the long table. My chair. The one I had occupied for months. The one I thought I had earned. But it wasn't mine anymore. Emily, he said, voice rehearsed, we've decided to move in a different direction. The words sliced through me. My hands trembled under the table, but I locked my fingers tight so no one could see. My throat burned with unspoken questions. Why? After all my hours, after every late night, after giving more than I had? Instead of answers, he slid a manila envelope across the polished wood. Severance. A quiet way to make me disappear. I felt the sting of humiliation, hotter than the tears pressing behind my eyes. Around me, colleagues shifted uncomfortably, pretending to look at their phones, pretending not to watch. No one spoke for me. No one reached out. When I stood, the chair scraped loudly against the floor, a sound that seemed to echo my erasure. My seat at the table was gone, and with it, the fragile belief that the world was fair. That night, I went to my grandmother's house. She was the only person I could bear to face. She pressed a small silver key into my palm, cool against my skin. Don't you ever let them decide your worth, she whispered. This is for you. A reminder. When one door closes, you make your own. I held that key so tight it left an imprint in my skin. That night, I made myself a vow. They could take my chair, but they would never take my place in this world. The first months after losing my chair were brutal. I remember the silence of my small apartment, the way it echoed every doubt that gnawed at me. Rent notices piled on the counter, and my fridge carried more empty space than food. Pride kept me from asking for help, even from my own family, especially from them. They had always questioned why I wanted more, why I chased something bigger than a safe job. Losing that chair only proved their point. But every night, I'd take out my grandmother's silver key and hold it against my chest, whispering to myself, not the end, not yet. I started with freelancing, copywriting jobs online, data entry at odd hours, anything that would keep the lights on. The glow of my laptop became my only companion. My face lit blue as the city slept. My eyes burned, my fingers cramped, but with each assignment, I scraped together a little dignity, a little momentum. One evening, after submitting a last-minute project, I received an email from a woman named Margaret Hayes, CEO of a mid-sized marketing firm. She had read one of my articles and wanted to meet. I almost deleted the email, thinking it had to be a mistake. But something in her words, professional yet curious, pulled me in. Margaret was unlike anyone I had met in that corporate tower. She was sharp, seasoned, and unapologetically herself. She didn't ask for my resume first. She asked for my ideas. And for the first time, someone listened. She became my mentor. Not the hand-holding kind, but the type who would glance at my work and say, "Good. Now make it better." She pushed me, demanded more than I thought I could give, but she also gave me something priceless: belief. With Margaret's guidance, I landed my first steady client. Then another. I learned how to pitch, how to negotiate, how to hear no without letting it carve into me. I reinvested every dollar into building something of my own, a small consulting agency, nameless at first, just me and my laptop on a borrowed desk. The nights were still long, the doubts still loud. I'd cry sometimes, staring at my chipped nails, my coffee gone cold, wondering if I was crazy to think I could rise from nothing. But then I'd remember the scrape of that chair against the conference room floor, the look in my manager's eyes as if I didn't matter. That memory became my fire. Slowly, the wins grew. A startup I helped rebrand doubled their revenue. A small business I coached landed national coverage. With every success, I carved out my independence, brick by brick, invoice by invoice. And yet, I kept it all quiet. On social media, I posted generic updates, nothing flashy. When my family asked, I brushed off details. It wasn't shame, it was strategy. I didn't want their doubts or their disbelief shadowing what I was building. Because deep down, I knew. One day, I'd show them. One day, they'd see that the woman they dismissed was the woman rewriting the rules. The first sign was the receptionist's voice crackling through the intercom. "Ms. Carter, there are some visitors here to see you." Thea insisted. Visitors. My heart knew before my mind caught up. I set my pen down slowly, letting silence settle in the room like dust. Through the glass wall of my office, I saw shadows moving, familiar shapes blurred against the frosted glass. It had been nearly a decade, yet I knew them. The company executives who had stripped me of my chair. My former manager among them, his arrogance practically seeping under the door. "Send them in," I said, voice steady though a storm raged in my chest. The door opened, and there they were, older, grayer, but still cloaked in entitlement. They stepped into my office like they owned the air, their eyes darting across the space, the modern art on the walls, the polished oak desk, the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city's skyline like a crown. For a moment, none of them spoke. Their silence was louder than words. "Emily," my old manager finally said, trying to wear a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You look well." "Well?" I echoed, leaning back in my chair. My chair. The irony tasted sweet on my tongue. They shuffled awkwardly, scanning the plaques on my wall, the awards, the framed front-page articles highlighting my firm's achievements. My name was everywhere, in bold letters, undeniable. I let them absorb it. Suspense is a kind of power, and I wasn't about to waste it. Finally, one of the executives cleared his throat. "We've heard remarkable things. Your firm's expansion. Your acquisitions. Quite impressive." "Remarkable," I repeated softly, turning the word over like a polished stone. They didn't know how to ask, so I gave it to them. The truth. The twist. The one line they never imagined they'd hear. "I own this floor," I said, my voice slicing through the quiet. "Every square foot. The offices you walked through, the contracts you've been hearing about, it's all mine." The silence that followed was thick, electric. Their eyes widened, disbelief painting every face. My manager blinked, as if trying to wake from a dream. "You own it?" "Yes," I said, letting the word breathe, letting it settle into their bones. "When you took my chair, you thought you ended me, but all you did was set me free. And now here we are, me at the head of the table, you standing in my office." The room shifted. Their shoulders hunched, their eyes darted like guilty children caught in a lie. Some looked ashamed, others simply stunned. I remembered that day, the scrape of my chair, the heat of humiliation burning my skin. And now, that memory had transformed into something powerful, a living monument inside this very space. One of the younger executives tried to recover. Emily, perhaps there's room to collaborate. We could. I raised a hand. Stop. My voice was calm, but sharp enough to cut. I built this from nothing. I bled for it. I lost sleep, relationships, years of my life, so I could sit here, in this chair, in this office. And I did it without any of you. The city lights outside began to flicker on, golden against the fading sky. For a second, I let the silence return, just like they had once let mine hang in that cold conference room. Only now, the silence belonged to me. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. So tell me, why should I give you a seat at my table? Their faces said everything.
Shame.
Regret. A grudging respect they could no longer deny. And for the first time, I felt the balance tip. The power wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. Completely mine. I let them sit across from me, though I noticed how stiffly they lowered themselves into the leather chairs, as if unsure they deserved the comfort. The irony was delicious. Years ago, they had stripped me of a chair. Now they sat in mine, but only because I allowed it. I folded my hands on the desk. You want something from me? Let's not pretend otherwise. But if you think this is the same girl you dismissed, humiliated, erased, you're mistaken. I don't give second chances freely. Not without conditions. Their eyes flicked toward one another, discomfort rippling through them. Good. Let them squirm. To my former manager, I said, locking eyes with him. You thrived on silencing voices like mine. Women with ambition, people you couldn't control. If you want any kind of partnership here, your condition is this: mentorship. You will take 3 young women under your wing and elevate them the way you should have elevated me. Not in words, in action. If you can't, you don't belong anywhere near my company. His face flushed crimson. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. I turned to another executive. You, I said softly. You laughed the day I lost my chair. Do you remember? It echoed across that conference room. That laugh still lives in me. So your condition is simple. Humility. You will sit in on our entry-level training program for 3 months. Listen.
Learn.
Hear the voices of the very people you once considered beneath you. Only then will I consider shaking your hand. The man swallowed hard, nodding silently. I shifted my gaze to the youngest among them. His arrogance was quieter, but still there, simmering. And you, I said. I don't hate you. But I see you, the way you measure people by profit, the way you dismiss anything without a dollar sign. Your condition, generosity. My firm donates 10% of its profits annually to education grants. If you want my ear, you'll match that. Out of your own company, your own salary. No excuses. They stared at me, stunned. Not because the conditions were cruel, but because they were fair. More than fair. These weren't punishments. They were lessons. I leaned back, letting my words settle. I don't need you. I don't need your approval, your validation, or your networks. What I am offering is a chance. A chance for you to prove you've grown. A chance to rewrite your own legacy, just as I rewrote mine. For a moment, the room was quiet except for the hum of the city beyond the glass. I softened my voice, though my resolve remained steel. I don't carry hate for you anymore. That weight was too heavy. What I carry now is clarity. I know who I am. I know what I've built. And I know this. If you want to sit at my table, it will be on my terms, not yours. Their heads bowed slightly, a collective surrender. And for the first time in my life, I felt the scales balance, not tilted against me, not favoring them. Balanced finally. In the weeks that followed, I watched them begin to change. Not perfectly, not overnight, but in ways that surprised me. My former manager, once too proud to even say my name, was suddenly sitting with interns, asking questions instead of barking orders. The executive who once laughed at me sat humbly in training rooms, listening to 22-year-olds explain strategies he'd never considered. And the youngest of them? He sent me a copy of his company's first donation check, his handwriting shaky in the note he enclosed. Maybe this is a start. I won't lie, part of me wanted to scoff, to tell them it was too little, too late. But another part, the part my grandmother nurtured in me, knew better. Growth is never about perfection. It's about direction. And for the first time, their steps were pointed toward something better. One late evening, long after everyone had gone home, I stayed behind in my office. The city was alive outside my window, glowing with the same relentless hunger I once carried alone. I opened the top drawer of my desk and pulled out the object I'd kept hidden all these years, the small silver key my grandmother had pressed into my hand. I held it tightly, just as I had on that night when everything fell apart. The edges were smoother now, worn from years of being carried with me. I smiled through the quiet, whispering the same words she once spoke. Don't you ever let them decide your worth. I thought about the journey, the humiliation of losing my chair, the nights I cried into my pillow, the battles I fought alone. And then I thought about this moment, me, here on the 15th floor of a building I owned. Not because someone gave me permission, but because I claimed it. I placed the key back in the drawer, where it belonged. It was no longer just a symbol of survival. It was a reminder of who I became. When I finally stood to leave, I glanced at the chair behind my desk. For years, I had measured my worth by whether or not I was allowed to sit in one. Now I knew better. I walked to the door, heels clicking against the floor that was entirely mine, and paused just long enough to let the truth rise in me one final time. They thought they could take my chair, I whispered into the stillness. But all they did was give me the floor.